Hi everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Economic Club of Indiana. We're really glad you're here. The Economic Club is a 40-year-old Indiana-based organization that invites extraordinary national and local leaders to share information that's relevant for all of us. My name is Kathy Langham, and I am President and CEO of Langham Logistics. I'm also honored to serve as President of the Economic Club of Indiana. Before introducing today's guest, I want to take a moment and thank our Platinum sponsors. We so appreciate your investment in us. As we continue the club this year virtually, we are committed to stay social distance and masked up. Having said that, I'm delighted to be out from behind my desk today and have the opportunity to be sitting here at the NCAA headquarters, live and in person with Mark Emmert. We will continue, though, for the rest of this season, which is really through May, to be virtual, but really look forward to the fall season when we can all be back together. The success of our virtual events is because of you. So as always, let's keep the conversation going through social media. The Economic Club Twitter handle is @EconomicClubIN, or you can also tweet #EconLunch. I'm very excited to introduce this month's speaker, NCAA President Mark Emmert. Mark is the 5th president of the NCAA and has been in that role since 2010. He has championed greater support and opportunity for student athletes in all divisions in all sports. His commitment to academic success, well-being, and fairness has resulted in the creation of the NCAA Sport Science Institute and the Commission on College Basketball, chaired by Condoleezza Rice, by the way. These are methods to increase student voices throughout the governance process. Before the NCAA, Emmert was president of his alma mater, the University of Washington. Under his leadership, the university rose to second among all private and public institutions in research dollars raised on an annual basis, $1.3 billion each year. Emmert previously served as chancellor of Louisiana State University, provost and chancellor of the University of Connecticut, and provost and vice president for academic affairs at Montana State University-Bozeman, and various other positions. Emmert is also a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He is former chair of the executive group of Worldwide Universities Network and served on the National Security Higher Education Advisory Board. He is a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and was previously an American Council on Education Fellow and J.W. Fulbright Administrative Fellow. Well done. Audience, we'd love to hear from you, and the chat feature is open. We have some questions for Mark, but please add yours. Now, I am very pleased to talk with today's guest, Mark Emmert. Mark, welcome.
Well, thanks, Kathy. Good to be with you all. And it's nice to have a mask off, even for just a minute, even if it's at this distance. It's a sign of things to come, I hope.
Yes, I hope so too. Thank you. Well, we're delighted you have taken the time to have a conversation with us. We're delighted to be right here in the NCAA headquarters in the heat of March Madness.
Yeah, it's great.
So what I'd like to do is ask you a couple of NCAA questions first, more governance type questions, and then get into the games.
Sure.
Okay. So the NCAA is a membership organization that is a bit complicated, a bit complex.
A bit.
You have over 1,100 colleges and universities.
Yes.
Over 400 committees.
Yes.
Over 500,000 student athletes.
Yes.
And 98 voting athletic conferences. So it must be an incredibly difficult job to move things forward. What is the governance like here?
Well, first of all, it's a really important question because most people, when they think of the NCAA, they naturally enough think of some analog like the NBA or the NFL. Couldn't be further from the truth. 500,000 student athletes, as you point out, 1,100 schools, not 32 teams or something. We have 19,000 teams, right? And all of the decisions, most people don't know this, all of the decisions on rules, on policies, on economic allocations, on who gets punished and who doesn't get punished, on who gets into the tournament. We run 90 championships. Who gets into those? All of those decisions aren't made by anybody who works in this building. Oh. They're made by the member schools. We run the governance structure through something that looks sometimes blessedly, sometimes painfully like Congress. All of those conferences send in representatives. We meet usually here. We have meetings here on a quarterly basis, look at all the proposals around rule changes or anything else that's going on, all of the decisions about who's going to get in or into the tournament, like the tournament here. That was 10 member representatives from from the schools in Division I. They make all those choices. So my job, the only thing that's close metaphorically to my job is really Secretary General of the United Nations, right? It's sort of like herding the cats.
Yeah.
And we got big schools, small schools. The UN's got, China and Ghana and everything in between. Well, we have little D3 schools in Ohio State, all in between. And so it is a really fascinating challenge to keep herding everybody, keep them focused on the big issues, and then drive forward to getting them to make decisions about what needs to happen. And sometimes it's too slow. It can be really frustrating for all of us. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's like democracy. It's the worst of all the processes except for everything else, to paraphrase Churchill. And so we make it work.
Yeah, great. Now, does every school get the equal vote?
Depends. So yes, it does in Divisions 2 and Division 3.
Okay.
In Division 1, it's a representative democracy. So the Division 1 council, for example, gets one vote for each of the conferences. Okay. So it works that way.
Okay. And so I imagine through COVID, we've got to ask at least one COVID question.
Yeah.
The NCAA really did you make the choices whether the schools had athletics last year or not, or was that at school by school?
Yeah, another good question. So we, the NCAA, only control our championship events, those 90 events. Okay. So we could say, as we sadly did a year ago, we're not doing these. We can't do them. It's impossible. Whether or not a school played or didn't play, whether or not a conference played, or even a whole division, that was up to the individual schools themselves. Okay. So every school had to make that choice. And then when some of them didn't reach 50% of the schools participating in a division, we had to say, then we can't do a championship because you couldn't do a fair one. So it was a partnership, but that was always up to the schools.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So there's a lot of change happening in the world.
Indeed.
And a lot of it affects colleges and sports. So could you, I've got three in particular, could you provide a perspective on the role of the NCAA regarding three different issues that are just timely right now? Number one, your perspective on transgender athletes competing, especially in women's sports.
Yeah, so what the member schools have decided, again, right here in this building, bringing them all together, we've looked at this issue, we provided a lot of advice and information and recommendations. So the position of the NCAA today is that should a transgender athlete, let's assume, for example, a transgender woman, want to participate as a woman athlete, our position has been where the Olympics always were, and that is, you can do that, but only after a year in treatment under the care of a physician through drug therapy to suppress testosterone, which research shows is the biggest differential in performance. So you have to undergo a year's worth of testosterone suppression, and if you've done that, then we allow that person to participate. And we have had some of those participating. Mm-hmm. Contrary to what people believe, you can't just be a transgender student or identify as transgender. You have to go through that process in order to be eligible.
Okay. Compensation for college athletes. What is your perspective?
Well, the biggest and hottest issue really in many regards, and we're hearing and seeing a lot of that right now, it means a lot of different things. So for those people who are advocating that student athletes should be paid employees of universities, right? Professionals. The member schools universally, and me too, the member schools universally reject that because that would completely destroy the fundamental character of what college sports is about. Now they're not students playing for their school, now they're employees hired by that school. The relationship is no longer student-university, it's now employee-employer, completely different things. We have that model in minor leagues and in regular professional sports leagues. That's not what college sports is about. When it comes to allowing student athletes to generate revenue on their own, my take and the university's takes right now is that student athletes should have all the opportunities that a regular student has, unless there's some compelling reason to create a rule to prevent or modify that. So the big debate right now is around, can a student do a sponsorship deal, student athlete do a sponsorship deal to monetize their so-called name, image, and likeness? I'm all in favor of that.
Okay.
We've been working for 2 years now to get that in place. We unfortunately have around 30 different states passing different rules. We can't have that. We need one rule for the nation, so we're working with Congress to try and get a single rule to cover the nation to allow that to occur. I hope we're going to get there this year. Congress is a complex entity, but we got a lot of bipartisan support, both bicameral support. So I think we'll get there, but it's taken way longer than it should have. And we've had the Department of Justice get involved, and it's just gotten messy, but it surely should occur. And then lastly, students need to receive from their schools all those things that support their academic success. You know, anything at all that a student needs to be successful, they should be able to get, and they're getting it now across almost the entire enterprise.
Okay. And a lot of college athletes get stipends, don't they?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
They're getting if you look at, you know, Purdue and IU, for example, or most any of the major programs, a student athlete today gets tuition fees, room, board, books, supplies, gets all of their expenses taken care of, gets on average about a $5,000 stipend in addition to that. If they're a low-income student, they're also getting a Pell Grant, which could be another $5,000. They can receive support for anything they need to be a student athlete, for transportation to and from home. So all of their costs as a student are being covered in that sense. Wonderful medical care, a lot of confusion about medical care. They're getting world-class medical attention.
That's great.
Yeah, we're proud of that.
The last is just social justice. That has come up a lot in the last year. And is there a role for the NCAA around that?
Well, the first role is to recognize that these are students. First and
Yes.
foremost, they're students. As a former university president, I always encouraged students to be involved in issues they care deeply about, whether it's social justice or anything else. And so I'm delighted when I see student athletes wanting to be engaged and wanting to participate. And you know, sometimes that overlaps with sporting events. You know, we've seen a lot, even in our tournament this past week, we've seen student athletes taking a knee. I think that's perfectly fine. We can debate whether you like it or not, but they should have that opportunity to engage in that expression. As long as it doesn't interfere with the conduct of a game or interfere with another team that's participating in that game, good for them. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Makes sense. The Economic Club is, this is the Economic Club.
It
and
is.
Obviously we care about different organizations and the financial impacts. And the NCAA did over $1 billion in revenue in 2019.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, in 2020, canceled, 90 championships.
Yep.
So how do you reconcile that?
Well, not easily. So maybe, especially given this audience, it might be useful for me to give NCAA Finance 101 real quickly.
Please.
So, yeah, I'm using round numbers, so forgive me for that. But in general, the NCAA has about $1 billion revenue stream coming in every year, which is an enormous amount of money, obviously. The majority of that, about 80%, comes from one event, the men's basketball tournament. So around $800 million all in comes in. We also, as I said, receive revenue from the other championships. So we run those other 89 championships. Only a few of those are what you would, a business person would call cash flow positive. But that generates another, again, round numbers, $100 million. Another 100 from a variety of ancillary things. What do you do with $1 billion? Well, the first thing, again, that most of the world doesn't recognize is we're predominantly a pass-through. So 600 million of the billion, so 60% right off the top, is immediately distributed out to other schools, to the Division I schools. Complicated formula, some based on how well you did in the men's tournament, some based on, starting this year, on how well you do academically, because you got to hit some academic thresholds to have it work. Some based on, loosely I'll describe this as a matching fund based on how much support you provide the student athletes on your campus. So a complicated formula again created by the schools themselves because they set the rules. So the schools have created this formula, we administer it and then distribute that $600 million. About another $100 million off the top goes out to schools through various supplemental support funds that are directly to support students that have a need. Student breaks a computer, can go to the athletic department, I need a new computer, fine. Student athlete has a grandmother pass away, I need a ticket home, fine. We can. So that funding goes out to cover all of those kinds of needs. So that's all distribution. The rest goes out through support of those other championships. The other championships all cost a lot of money to pull them off. So around 125 goes to running championships. We use a balance for running all the governance structures and our Sport Science Institute, doing all our medical research in support of medical work, et cetera. About 4%, between 4 and 5% is administrative overhead, as you might see in any enterprise. So when we lost 75% of our revenue last year in one decision, we were able to mitigate some of that through event cancellation insurance, but only about a quarter, no, actually a third of it that way. We had lines of credit, like every business out there had, that we were able to pursue, and then we engaged in all the revenue reductions that you would expect. We have done a lot of painful furloughs for a lot of our people here in Indy. We've done early retirements and voluntary separation plans. We're down around 20% of our FTE here in Indianapolis. That's been difficult, obviously, but that's where we needed to be. We also had to reduce the distribution going out to all the schools. So all of the schools also had to take a haircut on all of this to get us to where we are now. We have a lot of reserve funds, but if you remember last March, what things were like, we had those reserves in investment portfolio. A year ago, investment portfolios were not places you wanted to be drawing cash from. So we had to do some liquidations, but we then, of course, have seen that recover. And so we're in much better shape right now. It's going to take us 2 years to get out of this. We're trying very hard to get back to normal distributions for the schools. So I think our model didn't look dramatically different from most businesses out there. You know, think of what hoteliers and restaurants have been going through. We've been doing the same thing. And we took voluntary pay cuts. So the leadership and I all took 20% pay cuts and went through that as well.
Wow, pretty amazing. So March Madness is incredibly important for Indianapolis and incredibly important for the NCAA, too.
It is.
Yeah. So let's talk March Madness. We're so thankful, we the city, to have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to host all of March Madness. So this wasn't in my script, but yeah, you know, if we do it really well, will we get another?
Yeah. Well, you know, look, our hope is we don't do this again because we did it because of a pandemic, and we love being in Indianapolis. It's home, obviously, that makes it easy, but it's a great host community for all the reasons we all know. The facilities work, the community works, the sports corps fabulous, Visit Indy's great, everybody's stepped up. I mean, the mayor, the governor, all the health authorities, if ever there was a team effort, this has been it. And it's easier here and it works and people love coming here. Yeah. But we also love moving it around the country, and people love, we're normally in 13 or 14 venues every season, so we just have to spread it around because that's what we do. Yeah.
Well, how did all this come together, and why Indiana?
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, we realized early that if we were going to be able to host championships, again, all of our championships, we were going to need to do it in a different way that could work in a controlled environment. We don't use the word bubble per se, but controlled environment with 4 different tiers of control in it, and we needed to do it in a singular place. We looked at all the options. Do we just do 4? Do we do 1? Do we do 16? Whatever. And the only way to make it work was in one place. Bring everybody in.
Yeah.
And then for men and women, and for other championships too. So then we had to look and say, okay, where are we going to do it? Well, the Final Four was already going to be here. We knew we had facilities. We knew that we could make it work here. There were other cities saying, take us, take us.
Right,
so
sure.
I was very popular there for a while with mayors and other sports corps. But I then sat down with the governor and with the mayor and just said, look, this would be the right place to do it for all the reasons I just enumerated. Yeah. But failure is not an option. We have to know that
right.
If we come, we can pull this off. And everybody made all the commitments. All the health authorities have been fabulous, just fantastic. Dr. Kane's been with us every step of the way. IU Health, can't say enough good things about IU Health. Sports Corp folks, just crushing it every day. It's been fun to watch it come off. And, again, not done. Had to lose a team. VCU sadly had to go home. But that means that everybody's doing their jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Caught it early, dealt with it, moved on. And it's really the spirit of Indiana and Indianapolis. I've lived, as you pointed out, in too many places. I've lived all around the country, East Coast, West Coast, everywhere in between. And I think it's important that Indiana understand, and I can say this because I'm not a native Hoosier, but what we can do here is unusual. And it's because people kind of check their egos at the door. They focus on trying to get something done. And then everybody says, okay, let's do it. And you don't get, we've been in venues around the country where, you don't see that. Yeah. What goes on behind the curtain, the world doesn't see, but sometimes behind the curtain, it's tough. And here, it's not tough. Challenging, hard, but everybody says, well, okay, we got to fix that. And it gets done. So that part's terrific for us. Yeah. And my people get to sleep in their own beds.
That's important.
It's important.
Yeah. Well, Visit Indy, Sports Corp, and NCAA seem to be joined at the hip.
Yeah, can't say enough about it.
Yeah, it seems like it's running very smoothly. Yeah. Several weeks ago, the Economic Club had the opportunity to hear Adam Silver talk about the NBA playoff. I'll call it a bubble, probably not the right word.
No, they call it a bubble. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Well, were there any specific strategies you took from that we were able to use here?
Yeah, we've been talking to Adam and Roger Goodell, and we talk constantly. Yeah. It's been one of the things I hope comes out of this, and I suspect most of you in the audience have seen across business enterprises, is that there's this highly competitive environment. We all compete in various ways, but during the time of COVID, people have said, yeah, let's learn from each other. And we've done that immensely well with the professional and amateur sports leagues, the conferences across all of college sport. We've been sharing data. Our medical staffs have been talking pretty much constantly. My guy, Dr. Brian Hainline, he's got speed dial for all of his counterparts at all of these places and lives pretty much with them. So it's been, for us, really invaluable to learn from everything as this year has marched on, whether it was hockey or baseball or football and then Adam's just a good friend, and he's it's great that he's here in town too with the Pacers and trying to make this all work, and they're going to do an all-star game here, so he's been very, very supportive.
Yeah, that's great. Well, how's the tournament gone so far? I guess from a management perspective and financially for you.
Yeah, well, take it in reverse order. Financially, it's not going to be as strong because we don't have ticket sales at the same level, right? Just like it's not as strong for Indianapolis as it would be if we had hard sellouts for all of these venues, which would have been a lot of fun, but impossible. So So yeah, there'll be financial implications for this, to be sure. But yeah, getting this done financially is really, really important. Mm-hmm. But I had to make calls last year on Friday the 13th, the day after we canceled. I just personally, emotionally had to call some coaches. I called the coach over at Dayton. If you remember, the Dayton Flyers were on this run. They had a shot at being a legitimate #1 seed. They'd already won their tournament. They were 48 hours away from Selection Sunday. They really could have been a #1 seed. They were real contenders. And that doesn't happen for them very often. Never happened. And I just had to call and say, man, I'm sorry. Yeah. And what was that like with those kids? And he talked about bringing them into the gym and sitting down in the gym and crying with them and talking about, life's lessons, and there's more important things in basketball. I can't imagine none of us wanted to make that call again. Nobody wanted to see 2 years in a row of that heartbreak. You saw on TV on Selection Sunday the kids jumping out of their seats when they got in. Yeah. And we were going to do anything possible to make sure we could make that happen. So first and foremost, how is it going? Spectacularly, because the kids are playing. Yeah. It's been a wild tournament. I mean, it's been unbelievably great. And I hope we get the same thing on the women's side, just because it's so bloody exciting. So management's been tough. But again, everybody's working through it. And as you know, we probably talk about this. We've had a lot of struggles down in San Antonio, not because of lack of goodwill, not because people aren't working their butts off, but we just, we dropped the ball in some cases. And so we fixed those and we're moving on. But it's got to be about these kids and these great storylines, and that's why it's so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's just delighted that the tournament's back and people are starting to get out and people are competing, and there's nothing like watching college kids play sports. I think the passion is
it's
just
so
incredible.
Passionate. It's so fun. This doesn't happen in the professional sports leagues.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about San Antonio. So some press over the weekend regarding the amenities for the women's team versus the men's. What is your perspective?
Well, look, we dropped the ball on a number of fronts. That's the main line here. No question about it. So there's no excuses. There's explanations, but there's no excuses for that. There's some clear misinformation that went out there. If you tracked on it, there was a debate about, well, why are the women getting antigen testing and the men are getting PCR testing? That had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to do with health and safety. It was simply the convenience and local decisions, working with local health authorities around what could be delivered faster and more efficiently and more effectively. It actually costs more in San Antonio to do the antigen test than it's costing for the PCR test here in Indianapolis. And the health and safety is identical. So some of that was just communication foul-ups, but no reason that we didn't have everything set around a weight room. And by the way, the weight rooms that were shown on the videos, those were never intended to be weight rooms. Those were exercise rooms before the kids went onto the court for practice. Those weren't supposed to be weight rooms. But once the video's out there, the video's out there. We didn't respond immediately as well as we should have, so that's on us. We've got that under control. I'm going down to San Antonio in a few hours, in fact, and meet with everybody and make sure they understand our commitment to women's sports is unequivocal and unabated. I'm incredibly proud of what we do in women's sports. Do we have more to do? Did we drop the ball? Do we have things to fix? You bet. And I'm happy to share share blame for all of that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I'll tell you the worst thing about it is not just that we dropped the ball. It's that for 3 days, almost now, that's been the conversation instead of about these amazing athlete stories.
Yeah.
You got teams that are in the tournament for the first time. You got teams that are coming back, with these amazing All-American athletes. You got some spectacular women athletes getting ready to play down there. And we didn't talk about any of that. We talked about a bloody weight room. Right. And that's on us.
Well, the chat is hot here.
Good.
How can the NCAA work with and engage indie nonprofits and community organizations? especially organizations that work with youth education and fitness?
Yeah, so we normally do that better than we have, of course, in the year of COVID. Again, not an excuse, but a bit of an explanation. I hired last year a new, wonderful new member of my team, Derek Craig, and Derek's former athletic director from Tulsa. He's responsible for diversity, inclusion, and community engagement. And so he's already been working with a lot of the nonprofits in the community. It's amazing, I hired him during COVID. And so he's not had a full face-to-face meeting with his staff, even though he's been on board since the fall. He's working away on it, and we'll see much more. Normally around this event, for example, we would be way more engaged. We couldn't do events, couldn't get large gatherings together. Stay tuned, we'll do more.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. How is the NCAA and NCAA dealing with students transferring? Do they lose a year and sit out?
Yeah, so, this has been a perennial, I can't speak to the community college, what they're doing there, but I can tell you what our policy has been. Again, long, complicated answer, I'll try and make it short. For long since I've been here, there was a policy in place that students in 5 sports, just 5 sports, men and women's basketball, football, baseball, softball, if they transferred, they had to sit down a year. Well, why those sports? Because those are sports that were badly lagging in academic performance. Mm. And when you transfer, you lose progress toward your degree typically. That has all been erased. We've worked for the past 10 years incredibly hard to get the academic performance of all athletes up. Those in particular, they're stellar now. I'm really, really proud of where students are in their academic performance across all of those sports. Men's basketball is over 80% graduation success rates now. They had been like 30 points below that. They're doing what they need to do. We have to change our rules. We're ready to vote to change all of those rules to eliminate it so that everybody in Division I gets one transfer free, if you will. No harm, no foul. We were going to do that in January. We got blocked because at the very last hour, literally Friday, we were voting on Monday, we got a letter, not blaming anybody, it's just a fact, got a letter from the Department of Justice, Antitrust Division saying, just want to let you know we have great concerns about this. Well, when the DOJ writes you a letter, you respond and say, okay, let's talk. The head of that unit, that was literally his last day on the job, so he's gone, transition of government. Now we got new people in the Department of Justice. We're talking with them, trying to talk with them literally today on a number of issues. I hope and believe that we'll be able to change that rule before next fall. I'm hoping that we could do that as early as our April board meeting, because ultimately my Board of Governors has to approve it, but that is a long overdue issue. This has been a 10-year debate. It's been a 20-year debate, but a 10-year debate. I think we finally got it at the right place, and it's fixed. I hope.
Okay, you may or may not be able to answer this one, but it's an interesting question because it has to do with high school tournament instead of college. But what do you think of the idea of doing away with the conferences tournament so every team has the opportunity to win?
I'm going to let the high school association wrestle with that one. But I'll tell you how we get into it. We get into this debate all the time about, well, why don't you make the men's basketball tournament bigger? Why don't you add more opportunities to compete? And why is it 68 on the men's side and, not, 95 or 100? Why don't you let everybody play? In fact, I saw one very prominent coach at the beginning of this year said, why don't we let all 351 of the D1 teams compete? It's because it's logistically impossible. It would dramatically deflate the role of conference tournaments and winning your conference. Winning your conference should count for something. Yeah. So we, in the Division I tournament, all 32 conference champions are automatic qualifiers, we call them, and that's why they get in. We debate it all the time. We talk about it, but right now we really like where we are. With the men's and women's tournaments, it's an exciting number. All I have to do is point to this tournament and say, everybody's getting a shot here. High school's different, I get it, but thank God I don't have to worry about that.
That's right.
We got enough going.
So I'm going to, one more, and then I'll get to a personal question.
Uh-oh.
How can we best support women's sports moving forward?
Well, I think this is going to sound, well, let me answer a couple ways. It's going to sound a little bit odd, but when you think about it, it's not, especially in the economics club. First of all, I'm really pleased, not satisfied. Those are two very different things. I'm pleased with what's happened in women's sports over the past, decades around Title IX. The transition has been stunning, right? And I'm of an age to have seen that. So that's remarkable progress. But that doesn't mean we need to be satisfied and say, yeah, look what we've done, isn't this great? No, that's not enough. We need to keep going and keep going and keep going until we get, honest to God parity in these things. One of the things that the average person out there can do, make sure you're paying attention to women's sports. Watch these games in the women's tournament on ESPN. Watch women's volleyball. It is spectacular too. Watch women's softball. Those are great, great games, and you will fall in love with them. These athletes are remarkable, and their athleticism is just impressive, and you just come away extraordinarily engaged, and we need to make sure that everybody sees the value of that and is engaged on it, and that can help us a lot in all of these activities. So support women's athletes, whether they're your granddaughter, your daughter, your spouse or partner. Support it and get them engaged. Support your local teams, including at your alma maters and your schools, and then watch it and be involved in it. You turn it on, you're going to enjoy it. Okay?
Well said. So, 500,000 students, 1,100 schools, social unrest, COVID. That's just in the last year. The fact that college sports and getting back to this is very critical for everybody. What has the pressure of the last year done to your personal stress level, and how do you handle that?
Oh, I don't think I'm that different from most of the audience out here. It's been a god-awful year, right? I mean,
Right.
So yeah, the stress levels have been huge for everyone. I have one advantage. I'm not exactly a spring chicken, and you accumulate enough scar tissue and enough battles in life, you learn to keep your priorities straight. Yeah. I'm blessed with a spectacular wife who is the only person on earth that would have stayed married to me, I'm sure. I've got a wonderful daughter and son, and they've got wonderful partners, husband and wife, and I got 3 beautiful grandkids and one more on the way in May that I worship, and they own me completely, and they know it, and they don't care about any of that. They don't care. It's just
keeps
life.
You grounded.
Keeps you grounded, right? They just want to know why I can't throw them as high as I could a year before because I'm tired. So I love that. I have things that I do, that like everybody, that get me away from it and force me to focus elsewhere. We were talking earlier about our mutual friend Mark Miles, who's spectacular. By the way, Mark and I are in complete agreement that for Indiana, we need this tournament to work well, and then next month we need a 500 with full stands. Because as Mark Miles knows, I'm an auto racing nut. I'm a big fan, but I also drive. I'm a vintage sports car racer, so I race a couple of vintage sports cars. And when you're on the track, you better not be thinking about work or bad things happen. And I have multiple distractions.
Yeah.
I love a good historical book.
And I heard you're a foodie and a wine
I'm a foodie.
connoisseur.
I don't know I'm a connoisseur, but I love great wines. And in fact, my wife and I make a blend of wine together.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
It's fun.
More on that for the next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting. Don't go into it as a business. It's not a business you want to go into.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. This has been a great interview, and you're super busy, and you took the time for us, so really, really appreciate it.
Well,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure, and again to you and the audience. Can't thank you all enough for what Indiana is doing to help us make this work. It's a great home for us, and we're seeing it demonstrated in full color right now, so that's super. Thank you all.
Absolutely, yes. I'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank our platinum sponsors. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. A recording of today's presentation will be on economicclubofindiana.com. And please join us next month on April 27th, and we will hear from our Indiana Governor, Eric Holcomb. Have a wonderful afternoon, and let's watch basketball. Thanks. Bye.